interested in your questions. I don't know if all of you know, but I've written a proposed ordinance for Paulding County. There are copies over here. The suggested changes are in red. So I would love to see this become a reality. So any questions you have or concerns, I would love to address them today. Just so I can get an idea, does everyone here know what trap, neuter, return is? Yes. Does everyone know what a community cat is? Maybe not.
What is it?
A community cat is the term that we're using now. For many years, cats were called feral cats. It means they're unsocialized. But it turns out that there's really a wide range of cats living outdoors in the community, and they run the gamut from completely feral, totally unsocialized, to completely socialized, but they live outdoors and they've never lived inside, and they're thriving outside. So the term community cats was for two reasons. One, so it encompasses all those different characteristics, and two, to indicate that it's really a community problem. These cats are the progeny of careless owners, people who abandoned their pets, abandoned their cats without sterilizing them first. So, you know, the cats didn't put themselves there. So trap, neuter, return, the official definition is the method by which entire colonies of stray and feral cats are humanely trapped, spayed or neutered, vaccinated, ear-tipped, and returned to their outdoor home. And they're ear-tipped usually on the left, so you can identify them from far away as having been through the TNR program, and you don't re-trap them. Or sometimes you do re-trap them, but then you just let them go. So the vacuum effect is the reason that other methods of community cat control haven't functioned. Basically what happens is when you take cats out of the territory and take them to the shelter, where the cats are euthanized because they can't be adopted, either the remaining cats, because it's rare for someone to catch all the cats, that would take a lot of intense trapping. The remaining cats either breed back to capacity because that area can support a certain number of animals, and even if you've got all the cats, cats from neighboring territories move into the new territory and then they breed back to capacity. So the colony on the right just moves right in and then doubles in size because it has a lot more resources now. So this is why trapping and euthanizing, which has been the predominant method of animal control in this country, doesn't work. This is why removing them to sanctuaries, and I put that in quotes because there really are so few, it's also really difficult to maintain. And in my opinion, money is better spent on spaying and neutering rather than caring for 20 cats in an enclosed pen, for the next 15 years. So this was the brief I wrote, or the policy statement I wrote, trap, neuter, return ordinances and policies in the United States. You can see in 2003, those dots represent communities doing TNR. And I want to be clear that these are governments doing TNR. If we did just people who supported TNR, or caregivers, or shelters that supported it, I think the map would be mostly blue because most communities have people doing this at some level. So those dots are just where the government has officially sanctioned and chosen trap, neuter, return as the only effective solution to their cat problem.
That's in 2003 or now?
2003. No, now 2013, the support has increased tenfold. So there were 24 ordinances back in 2003, and now you can see there are over 240, and that number grows every day. In the past week, Buffalo, New York passed an ordinance, as did a town in Missouri and a city in Nebraska. So I truly believe that this is going to be what everyone is doing in 10 years. Simply because it's more effective and it's cheaper and it's more humane, and we know citizens are becoming more aware about those things, and it's important to them that their government treats animals well.
Is that what, you mind if we interrupt?
Yes.
You do?
Oh no, I don't.
Is that one in Georgia, Gwinnett County? You know?
In Georgia, I can't remember. I know Brunswick, Georgia supports it. DeKalb County. Athens, Clarke.
Athens, Clarke County has a
Yeah, Athens, Clarke County. I should have probably pulled my Georgia list, but I didn't. Oh, so I kind of skipped ahead. So as I mentioned, well, we discussed removing the shelters and why sanctuaries don't work. The other thing people try to do is relocate cats. And does anyone here know how to relocate a cat? When I first started working in feral cat issues, I thought it just meant you could pick up the cat and you put them like in a different place in a nice barn home. No, it's a 3-week intensive process. You have to be there every day. You have to buy these pens. They cost they cost about $600, and it's just a lot of work just to move these cats to a new place. And then probably 75% of the time they stay, and 25% of the time they leave, so they just go right back to where they were. So we don't think that's a good use of resources. The other thing that we hear is stop feeding. If you Google feral cat and city, you'll see a lot of cities think that if you tell citizens to stop feeding or you make it illegal, the cats will go away. Unfortunately, that's not true, because there have been feeding bans popping up over the last decade, but I've not found any community where that's worked. And that's because cats are opportunistic scavengers. So cats will just go into the trash or dumpsters, and ironically, sometimes when you pass a feeding ban, citizens then get angrier, because usually it's passed in response to citizens who are saying, I don't want cats here, you know, they're annoying me. They pass a feeding ban. The next thing you know, you get even more complaints, because cats that were previously fed in specific areas at specific times are now just cruising all over around the neighborhood, knocking things over. Because food isn't the only reason that cats stay in an area. It's because they have shelter, they have a water source, and it's a good place to live. Cats are not dependent on someone feeding them. So I would argue that trap, neuter, return is the best approach to feral cats, because 1, it stabilizes cat populations, it improves cats' individual lives, it makes cats better neighbors, and it helps the shelter. Also, it saves governments money, and I've included printouts about how it saves money in your folders. But essentially, the first issue is that doing something that doesn't work, no matter how cheap it is really not a solution. If you're just kind of pouring good money after bad, and because you're never going to have the cat population reduced. Every year you're going to be trapping and killing roughly the same amount of cats, or it's going to increase each year. So in my opinion, catching and killing cats wastes taxpayer dollars, because it doesn't provide a solution, and it's expensive. So in trap, neuter, return, cats continue to live in an area, but they're no longer reproducing, and they're vaccinated against rabies. And they keep potential newcomers at bay. So this is why the vacuum effect doesn't apply to TNR cats. New cats won't move into the area. Of course, there are people who might dump cats there, and then whoever has been TNRing them has to take care of those cats. But generally, cats will hold their territory. I've seen cats hold territory as small as a driveway from competitors. And eventually, the population decreases over time simply through attrition. Cats do not live, outdoor cats are probably not going to live much longer than 15 years. Yes?
Liz, you mentioned just a minute ago about rabies.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a big problem among cats, or is that more among possum and other type of wild animals?
It's primarily an issue among wildlife. I believe, is it 90? Someone else might know. It's either 90% or 95%. You can go to the CDC website section on rabies. And so wildlife is rabies is primarily from skunks, possums, bats.
Raccoons.
Oh, raccoons, yes. I forgot the big one.
Yeah.
Certainly rabies is not something you want to mess around with. So any trap, neuter, return program, you might also hear it called TNVR, because sometimes people think that we're supporting spaying and neutering without a vaccination. We would never do that. No responsible group would support that. It's not trap, neuter, return unless you're vaccinated against rabies.
So they're only getting one shot?
They only get one shot.
Who gives them the next shot?
Well, it depends on who's there. If it's a caregiver, if it's a very managed colony, then that person would trap probably in 3 years, I don't know if you know this, but if you have pets and you go to the vet every year for a rabies vaccination, even though it's marked 1 year, it really lasts 3 years. They just do that to get more money. So you have 3 years. Also, a couple studies have been done by a veterinarian, Dr. Julie Levy, in Florida University about how long rabies lasts. And it looks like it lasts much longer, maybe 7 to 8 years.
Is that when the ear's clipped, also to let you know?
Yes, when they're, oh yeah, if it's clipped, it means they've received a rabies vaccination.
Okay.
Unless it was like an unscrupulous veterinarian.
But
But,
then, do they clip it a little bit more when they get another one? Or
No.
no.
So when they
That's
have,
trauma.
when their ears clip, and we would see it, we would say, oh, it's already been taken care of, but we wouldn't know how long ago it had a rabies shot, right?
You wouldn't, and if you had the resources to retrap that cat and vaccinate against rabies, I would say go ahead. I always think in things of terms of policy and money. It seems to make more sense vaccinating other cats because the cat that was originally vaccinated probably has a longer span of protection than we think. And I also always say with the rabies question, look to the alternative. So we all know we have cats there. We know trapping and killing doesn't work. But a byproduct of trapping and killing is that you have constantly a new flow of cats that are not vaccinated. Meaning if you're trapping and killing in a community, you know, they're just more unvaccinated cats. Whether with TNR, you know those cats are vaccinated at least once. So it's kind of an imperfect solution, right? Ideally, we would not have feral cats running around. But we do. In this country, we have millions of them. So this is, I always want to be clear that this is the best solution we have right now, in my opinion. Yeah.
I've read several TNR ordinances around the country that are in effect right now, and some of them do state in there that the caretakers are responsible for maintaining the records of the cats in the colony, including how often they get the rabies and spay and neutered, any other type of vet activities or anything else for that matter. And I obviously haven't had a chance to look at the one you drafted for here. Is that included?
No, I personally, I guess my organization vigorously opposes ordinances like that. So we've actually campaigned against ordinances that require a lot of restrictions, like Fort Worth tried to pass one and we opposed it. And here's why, because one, it sort of criminalizes caregivers. We're talking about people who have spayed and neutered and vaccinated the cats at least once. We're not talking about the little old lady who's just throwing bags of food out and is perhaps causing a nuisance for the neighborhood. So the issue we found in studies of other places that have passed those ordinances is that the amount of TNR goes down. Because first of all, some people are scared of animal control because maybe they didn't have the best impressions of them in the past, so they're afraid to come forward. And second of all, it just deters people when they think, I'm already doing a community service, why do I have to go through all these steps? So places like Chicago has an ordinance like that, and in Broward County, Florida, and I think they've just been less successful.
Now, as far as these colonies, how many cats do some of these people take when they create a colony? If somebody's taking responsibility for a colony,
They don't create the colony.
about how many cats? I mean,
Oh, a colony mean is anywhere from 2 to, I'd say, I mean, it's 2 to anything. It's rare. I don't know if you got how big the colonies get down here. I usually don't see colonies bigger than 20. That would be a lot. Usually I see like 6 or 7. Obviously, you all hear, like if you look online, you can find like the 150 cat colony, which is something really wrong happened there, but that's rare.
well, that's what I was gonna say, because if you're in a subdivision, you've got 20 cats, somebody's got 20 cats at their house, neighbors are not going.
Wait, they're usually the neighbor's cats. I have to
Well,
tell you.
I'd also want to distinguish between community cats and someone's pet
Yeah.
cat. So if someone's
Yeah.
pet cat is running around,
Okay, well, that's what I was gonna say, yeah, if these are TNR cats that they've been
They'll
clipped
have
and
the-
stuff, yeah, if they've been clipped and you've got 20 of them in a subdivision, I mean, that's what my question's leading to, how many
Like
cats,
new-
yeah.
the colonies are You know, I can't give you a number. It just goes
Yeah,
back to if you.
Yeah, I realize the community cats, somebody turns their cats out during the daytime, and at nighttime they bring them back in, so the coyotes and stuff don't.
I mean, if you have a colony that big, I can see how a 20-cat colony would be pretty disturbing. I would first recommend that the socialized cats be polled, if they can be adopted, because oftentimes you'll have a mix of socialized and feral cats. And then second, I would talk to the neighborhood about humane deterrence and ways to deal with nuisance. I think that would be less common to have 20 cats. Maybe we're picturing different things. I'm picturing like townhouses or like with some grass. I don't see, 20 cats probably aren't gonna be living in such tight proximity
Okay.
to one another, but, you know, anything's possible. Yes.
Looking at some of the things in the ordinance, I noticed that you had defined community cats.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about what that definition means, what other types of categories of cats exist beyond community cat?
Pet cats.
So there, are there any more beyond that?
Not that I'm aware of. It's sort of, they're all domestic cats. They're all the same species. The only thing that's different is their socialization level. There's nothing different biologically. So the term community cat, feral cat, pet cat, those are terms that we ourselves created as animal advocates.
So under the ordinance, basically we have cats that are owned by people, and if it's not owned by a person, it is then a community cat. Would that be a fair statement?
It would. I've also seen there's an ordinance being considered in Northern California, I forget which county it is. They have defined pet cat, and they did that so that they could still apply licensing and at-large laws to the pet cats and then differentiate from the community cats. If that's something you would be interested in, I've seen that done.
Just analyzing the additional things to make sure I've got a good understanding on it. So if you have owned cats, the owners of owned cats can receive a citation for basically, lack of a better term, violating the leash law.
Mm-hmm.
If the cat is not owned by anyone, but animal control responds, they're now dealing with a community cat. And their only option at that point in time is, if the cat's done nothing else, would be, per this ordinance, they must go the TNR route.
Yes.
And who pays for the TNR route?
Well, I'll go into why it's less expensive. I specifically looked at Paulding County, but I know you guys have a very low-cost spay-neuter clinic that does cats for $30 a cat. And the alternative would be that the cat would be impounded at your shelter. And I hear that the length of stay, that they're euthanized every Wednesday, did you say? So if a cat came in Thursday, he would stay until Wednesday to be euthanized, and if he came in Tuesday night, he would only stay 12 hours. So I understand the cost of an impounded.
But just putting the whole euthanization
Mm-hmm.
thing aside, who would cover the cost of TNR if animal control picks up a community cat?
The county, because I've looked at how much you're spending on euthanasia right now, and I would argue that it would be less to spay neuter them.
Okay.
Yes?
I also learned from my personal vet that he will do 2 a month that are feral cats. He doesn't do them for free, that he does them at an extremely reduced cost of 2 a month. And if every vet was contacted and participated as well of 2 to 3 a month, then that would also help people that maybe go with a different pet there and they complain about the feral cat, to encourage them to trap neuter at the expense with their current veterinarian as well.
Sure, local veterinarians can also offer a great deal of help. To go back to the money,
Can I ask something about the rabies again, sorry, before we go on?
yes.
What, as far as the rabies goes, what other states have you dealt with that maybe has a rabies law?
So all the states I've dealt with, and I was most recently in West Virginia, Texas, Alabama, New York, California. And those rabies laws are written about owners, so own
So that's how we
pets.
get around that
Yes.
with rabies, is because they're not. So then, our biggest problem, and please, I'm very open-minded to what you have to say, I'm just trying to see both sides. So, if we're going after, the main reason why we have this problem are because of owners being irresponsible.
Mhm.
Is pretty much what it boils down to. So now, we're still trying to hold them accountable for what they're doing through our citations and stuff, but with the community cats, who are ones that maybe were owned, they're now lost, or by this definition, stray even, or abandoned, there's, no one's gonna be held accountable. So like the person who holds this colony wouldn't be held accountable for the colony, or oversees the colony, or however it needs to be described.
No, we're kind of, I'd say, nationally, groups and other attorneys, the other two cat attorneys I know, we're moving away from the idea of managed colonies. It's great if you have that, but I know, and I don't have any feral cats living near me, but I have driven to places, spayed all of them, and then left them there, because in my opinion, it's better to get them neutered and vaccinated, and then it's very far away, so I'm not going there all the time. So I don't know how many situations you'd have where someone was like out there every day, kind of saying, this is my colony. I can see how that would be upsetting to owners. I guess personally, I don't think leash laws are a great idea for cats because they're difficult to enforce. But I certainly understand if a community wants to do a dual, one rule for community cats and one rule for pet cats. And it'd be easy to differentiate between the cats because of the ear tip.
At what point would you think it's inhumane, say in a household, and I'm just reflecting back on when I see news clips and you see a house and there's 50 cats or something in there and it's a very, very bad situation. When you consider that inhumane,
They're in the house?
yeah.
Oh, well, that would not be trap, neuter, return. That would be hoarding, which is illegal under Georgia state law. That's a mental illness. We don't support any hoarding or anything like that for a number of reasons. One, it's not good for the animals. It's not good for the neighborhood. There's probably strong fumes of ammonia, feces. It's not a good situation. And so I know there is sometimes confusion between TNR and hoarding. I don't know how, because in TNR they're free, but we wouldn't support, if a house was filled with feral cats, we would not say, just neuter them and put them back in the house. That would be a pretty sad situation. Luckily they're rare. Sometimes they have to be euthanized because they're so sick, and sometimes you can find placement for them. But I hope, is that a big issue in this county, hoarding?
We've had a couple.
A couple, I mean,
But
I think
it's
that's,
usually hoarding with litter also, it's not necessarily just cats.
Yeah.
It's usually they go hand in hand.
yeah. Yes.
Now, I know some of the larger cities, Las Vegas, Dallas, Los Angeles, and even some of the smaller cities now are enacting spay neuter ordinances that apply to the citizens who just own house cats, not community cats, just your average house pets, and requiring anything over 4 months on average to be spay neutered, period. Of course, they have licensing and all those other things to help regulate and monitor that. I pulled the stats from our animal control from May to May, from May 2013 to 2014. And only 17.6% were, we'll call them feral, that's what we've been calling them, community cats, the best that I could measure. Again, the stats are not 100%, sometimes you can't distinguish between the two, as you pointed out earlier. Most of the cats that were euthanized, out of 615, were domestic, or at least considered domestic.
Socialized.
Socialized pets. So it seems to me, at least in Paulding County, and again, I'm new that I've been in animal control for 6 months, I'll tell you straight up, but crunching the numbers, it appears that the domestic problem may be feeding the feral problem, or vice versa. I really don't know. I'm not that versed in it. However, again, our problem as far as youth and being euthanized is going to be the homeless pets versus the community cats. And again, I'm not saying that the community cats don't deserve anything better. Please don't take that the wrong way. But going back to my original point, don't you think that having an ordinance that balances the pets versus the community cats would be more beneficial to us rather than one or the other?
Or
Well,
additional
you could do the
benefit.
dual, you could do a dual ordinance.
And I think talking about the rabies and the other things, it's like all of a sudden now the community cats are immune from prosecution, so to speak. Okay?
Well, that's only because they don't have owners, right, and you can't
Well,
prosecute a cat.
and that's, I'm not making that as a strict point, but the bottom line is, community cats or caregivers are not being held to any standard on this, which I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, there's no way to track or even trace any of these community counties.
I mean, I don't know why, I would say, first of all, what you're doing now is not reducing the community cat population.
No question.
No, so any money spent on that, I would argue, is a waste. It would make more sense to just stop accepting. I don't know your local laws about whether you need to accept all cats. Some cities don't accept feral cats. I personally would think it would be a better use of your resources to just not do TNR, but not euthanize feral cats. And caregivers are held to the standard that the cat has to be neutered and vaccinated against rabies, and to me that's the most important issue. If he's not ear-tipped, the protection doesn't come from being a free-roaming cat, the protection comes from the ear tip.
Right, and I've seen that, and just to follow up with that, what you had said earlier was that you were getting away from holding any of the caregivers accountable because it's scaring them away, and I understand that, but again, so that takes away some of the measurement, and also cats that are injured, who's monitoring those colonies to make sure if there's injured cats, that get infections, things of that nature, who's monitoring that
Sure,
to make sure
there
that
just aren't caregivers. There just aren't enough caregivers. This is our solution, is to TNR everything.
Okay.
Ideally, again, yes, everyone would have a caregiver, and then you could perhaps in a policy statement or, pass out to people who participate. We have best practices, about only removing food every 30 minutes, reporting animals that are ill. But the bottom line is you're not going to find that many. As far as tracking, other places like Jacksonville, not Las Vegas. So Jacksonville and New York City don't track. What they do is they look at the number of kittens coming in, like the bottle babies, neonatal kittens, because those are usually from ferals. So when that drops, that's one indication that it's working, and when overall cat intake drops.
Would the same not work if we made sure that every cat we adopted out was spayed or neutered? I mean, you're still cutting down then, because that's the problem, is spay and neutering. That they're going out, if there was no TNR and no taking in feral cats, we have twice the amount of cats now that we have, because they just got their breeding galore and nobody taking them in at all.
You release unneutered cats.
No. You said you'd rather do no TNR or no euthanization of feral cats, right?
Yeah,
If
and
you didn't do either one of
so
them,
that's-
we would have tons and
You
tons.
wouldn't though, and I know it seems counterintuitive, but so that's what 2 communities in California did. They were, California is always like in a budget crisis. So this wasn't for humane reasons. 2 cities, Chico, California, and I forget the other one, they just said, no, we're not taking any cats. And people were like, it's gonna be crazy, but it wasn't, because there's just a natural threshold of how many cats can survive in an area. And honestly, and I assume this is how you do it, animal control officers respond to nuisance calls and complaints, and then you accept feral cats that people bring in traps, right? Those people you're not getting all of them. So the moment you take one out, they're just breeding right back up. So it's it's just a drop in the bucket. It's not making a difference in terms of the population.
So when you say that it kind of takes care of itself, you're talking about they get like eaten by coyotes or something like that? Like how do they die that way instead of?
They get
No,
hit
I don't
by
mean
cars.
I don't mean they take care of themselves. I guess I didn't mean it that way. I mean that it's not like you could have a certain area will only support a certain number of cats, and that means the
So
litter.
if you've got 100 acres, and 100 acres will support 10 cows, what happens when you put 20 cows on? 10 of them die.
Yeah, so
And
the
land will only accept what the land will accept.
yes, their reproductive ability goes down, or kittens aren't nourished enough to make it, to the next week, or they're born deformed.
But the
sadly.
alternative is exactly what we've got, which is a constant reproduction system going on with or without our knowledge. Nobody's doing anything about it particularly. And so if you don't start spaying neuter in some capacity,
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong.
you're just
love to spay neuter
exponentially
everything.
creating more colonies
fun.
that will move into more territories.
And as you do, spay and neuter, my hope would be, if you did it aggressively, that Paulding County's community cat population would just drop
Dwindle.
in however many years. And unfortunately, feral cats they are as healthy as pet cats. Of course, living outdoors, you're more likely to get hit by a car. Hopefully, you wouldn't get hit by a car in your living room. So some feral cats, it is somewhat accelerated, the attrition.
I think, Leanne, I just see anything going.
When, in the event where a cat owner surrenders a socialized cat for whatever reason, maybe it's because animal control has come there and they say, you gotta stop letting your cats run loose, and they say, well, I'm gonna surrender them to y'all. So the shelter, animal control takes them in. Those cats are socialized. They don't get adopted out. In that factual scenario, is the draft ordinance, does that command TNRing those cats?
No.
Or,
That would be, in my opinion, unethical to put a cat who was living with an
Right.
owner back out on the street. So you would never put out a cat that hadn't been living outdoors, and if for some reason you found a cat living outdoors that was declawed, I wouldn't put him back if he was seriously injured or ill. I can't remember the fourth, but there's specific criteria.
let me ask you a question that I think I know what you're gonna say. And if you said the answer I'm thinking, I agree. Are there some situations where the euthanizing the animals is probably the most humane situation?
You mean if the animal's very ill?
You got a cat that won't be adopted out. We can't get them adopted out. They're socialized. They're in our custody. We're not going to TNR them because that's unethical and inhumane. What do we do at that point?
I would think I would consider that. Oh, I do want to make it clear. So I'm here talking about trap, neuter, return. You're kind of alluding to something called the no-kill movement.
I'm just thinking about what we deal with in court. We've got animals get surrendered, and we've got these animals.
I personally think to hold an animal in a tiny cage for months on end, it would be more humane to euthanize them,
Okay.
right? No one I think would say, just keep them in the cage for, for a year.
I did see a statement from PETA that said they cannot rule out euthanization as a viable alternative in some situations.
PETA kind of stands alone. They don't support many of the things that everyone else supports.